Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our virtual meeting of Brampton's Committee of Council. We will now begin the meeting with the City Clerk calling the roll for the attendance at today's meeting. Mr. Clerk.
Members of Council, I will call your names. Councillor Santos?
Here.
Chair Vicente is here. Councillor Willens?
Here.
Councillor Paleshi?
Here.
Councillor Bowman?
Present.
Councillor Medeiros?
Here.
Councillor Williams?
I'm here.
Councillor Fortini?
I'm here.
Councillor Singh?
I'm here.
Councillor Dillon?
Here.
And Mayor Brown, who is
Here.
ex officio. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Chair, all members are present.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We are now at approval of the agenda. Do any members wish to add a business item to today's meeting? If so, please use the of Skype to add your name to the speakers list. Do any members of council committee want to add or remove an item to today's agenda? I recognize Councillor Medeiros. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to add, and I think, Peter, if you can provide guidance, I had sent you a copy yesterday of a motion, but for discussion around user fees. So I'm assuming it would be the corporate section?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. Councillor Medeiros, it would be proposed item 8.3.1 under corporate services, a discussion regarding user fees.
Great. Thank you very much.
I see no other items being added for approval of the agenda. So we have a motion moved by Councillor Medeiros to approve the agenda. Instead of seeking a recorded vote for the item, I will ask members if any are opposed to the motion. Otherwise, your vote will be counted in the affirmative. Do any members oppose? No, that carries. Mr. Clerk. And for folks who are attending and watching the meeting virtually, as we continue to persevere in these extraordinary times, Committee of Council is permitted to conduct virtual meetings to support physical distancing and comply with public gathering restrictions while ensuring the business of the municipality can continue. Meetings of municipal councils are to be open to the public for transparency and accountability, and our meeting will continue to be as well, with a few precautions and limitations. In-person attendance at this meeting is severely restricted. Members and most staff are participating electronically in this meeting. The public can still access and participate in the meeting in a few different ways: by watching the meeting remotely through the city's live stream and playback of the archive video stream, and by submitting questions about the agenda business and decisions made by council today by emailing the City Clerk's office at cityclerksoffice@brampton.ca with your question, which may be read into the public record during the public question period sections on today's agenda. Also, please continue to follow important service and public health updates through the city's website at www.brampton.ca, which includes updated information on the city's response, as well as links to other important sources of information, including Region of Peel Health, Province of Ontario, and Government of Canada. A final reminder to members of committee before we start and consider today's agenda business: please ensure that your video is off and microphone is muted until you are assigned the floor. Then you can turn both on when you speak. This will help to ensure that only one person is speaking at one time and minimize other background disruptions during the meeting. So we're now at declarations of Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Do any members have a declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for any matter to be considered on today's agenda? Seeing none, the clerk will so note for the minutes. Our next item is item 3, consent motion. The items listed with an asterisk on the agenda are considered to be routine and non-controversial. The consent motion is to adopt these matters on today's agenda without the need for a separate discussion on the item unless a member requests a separate discussion. Does any member wish to add or remove an item from the consent motion today? Seeing none, no changes. Mr. Clerk, I have a motion moved by Councillor Santos to approve the consent motion. If anyone is against, please notice that in the box. Seeing none, that's approved. We have no announcements today, so we move on to government relations matter. Our next item is an update on staff report 5.1, government relation matters. Gurdeep Kaur is here with a presentation for committee on government relation matters. Gurdeep, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and through the chair, I will quickly go over some of the key government relations announcements and incentives from last week, and where available, provide updates since our update was circulated. If we can move forward to slide 1, please. Thank you. Thank you. Last week, the federal government extended the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy through to August the 29th, began accepting applications for the Canada Emergency Student Benefit, and announced a series of financial relief measures for seniors as well. The Large Employer Emergency Financial Facility Program, while few specific dates have been provided as to who will be eligible, the types of entities that are currently eligible are large for-profit businesses, all sectors except financial, and certain nonprofit organizations. We will provide further updates as they become available. The new Regional Relief and Recovery Fund was announced to support businesses that are unable to access other existing measures. Businesses in Southern Ontario will have access to approximately $252.4 million. The government also announced an investment of nearly $470 million to support Canada's fish harvesters, and on behalf of Farm Credit Canada announced the launch of a $100 million Agriculture and Food Business Solutions Fund. Yesterday, the government announced changes to the Canada Emergency Business Account to allow sole proprietors who pay employees through dividends rather than payroll to access interest-free loans to help cover operating costs. Other recent new measures include $100 million in funding to support Red Cross meet demand due to COVID-19 and to support future floods and wildfire relief efforts, and announce an increase to the Canada Child Benefit beginning in July, raising it to the maximum benefits available. Slide 3, please. Sorry, the next slide. Thank you. Thank you. Provincial government. We've highlighted a number of updates from the province, which included announcing additional workplaces that can reopen. The significant announcement was identifying a list of businesses that are allowed to reopen provided they follow public health guidelines, in line with the province's framework for reopening the economy as of May the 16th, 2020. Workplaces like golf courses, marinas, private parks, campgrounds, and businesses that board animals were allowed to open. And beginning yesterday, retail services, not shopping malls, seasonal businesses, recreational activities, animal services, indoor, outdoor household services, lifting essential workplace limits on construction, and allowing certain health and medical services to resume were allowed to open. Yesterday, there were several announcements that I wanted to highlight, but I'm sure you're aware of. Schools will remain closed for the rest of the school year, as the government plans for the reopening of schools for the 2021 school year, with a plan to be announced later this summer, and released Ontario's framework for continued learning, including the province's 7 areas of focus summer learning plan. Additional measures include gradual reopening of childcare, reopening of summer day camps. Overnight camps are closed with strict health and safety guidelines. Announcements include extending all emergency orders to May the 29th. The province also extended all emergency orders through to May the 29th with only an amendment to allow people attend drive-in religious gatherings under certain conditions, keeping vehicles 2 meters or more apart. Only members of the same household can be in that one particular vehicle. People are not allowed to leave vehicles. No more than 5 people can conduct the service at one time from outside a motor vehicle. Lastly, the province announced an independent commission in long-term health care in Ontario. Next slide, please. Thank you. Last week, we provided an overview of key reports and presentations discussed at the May 14 council meeting. I will not go back through those reports. However, we did want to provide you with links to the presentations that were not available at the time of the presentations. I do want to highlight Region will be bringing forward a report addressing mental health issues at the May 28 meeting, and we will provide further information when it becomes available. Next slide, please. Thank you. Last week, I noted FCM's 10 million philanthropic donation from the Canadian Medical Association Foundation. This COVID-19 Community Response Fund for vulnerable populations will direct allocations to communities with homeless populations according to needs. This week, I can confirm that the region is one of the 7 recipients and will be receiving a letter on further details, including allocation of those funds. FCM is also seeking a member from the public to sit on the Green Municipal Fund Council. This information has been circulated within our community. Next slide, please. Thank you. Last week, AMO and the Greater Toronto Hamilton Area Mayors and Chairs and LUMCO were united in advocating to the federal and provincial governments for financial support for the municipal sector. Each group is supportive of FCM's advocacy positions to the federal government regarding the 10 to 15 billion municipal emergency operating fund I previously have presented. The city is continuing to participate with our municipal partners in putting pressure on the federal and provincial governments for financial support. Our hope is to hear something soon on this. Thank you. That concludes my presentations, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Thank you, Gurdeep. And we do have a question from Councillor Willens.
Yes, through you, Chair. Gurdeep, is there anything we do? I know that last week, I think it was last council, I put my name forward to sit on AMO. Is there anything we have to do at my end, do a profile or anything to forward it on to them? I think that's what we have to do. And I know. And when's the deadline?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor. We are actually working on getting everything ready for you, and it's actually June the 22nd, but prior to the deadline, I think within this week we should reach out to you. So you can expect GR staff to reach out to you directly, and any questions and anything you need, we're actually working in the background to prepare everyone for that.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Gurdeep. I have a motion. Seeing no further questions, I have a motion moved by Councillor Paleshi to receive the report. Anyone opposed? That carries. Our next item is item 5.2, an update on the COVID-19 emergency. Mayor Brown has been providing regular weekly updates to council and committee at our meetings, and I would now like to invite the mayor to provide an update to committee today. Mayor Brown.
There, okay, now I'm connected. So thank you, Council, for this opportunity to give a COVID-19 update. I should say, first of all, we still have significant work to go. We're not seeing a flattening of the curve that we need to have a reopening like we're seeing in some European countries. And it's a reminder to us that we still need to be diligent. I talked about this at our press conference this morning, that the increases in the community spread is still a threat we have. Areas that have more density are going to face more challenges, and we have density in Peel Region, and we're right next to the major highways and Pearson International Airport. And so we need to keep up the physical distancing measures. We can't relax. It's why in some communities they're opening baseball diamonds and soccer fields, and we're not doing that. In basketball courts, we're not doing that yet in Peel Region. The advice of our medical officer of health and both hospital CEOs was that we need to take a slower approach. And so I know many of us love team sports. You know, I'm a hockey net and nut, and I'm dying to get back on the ice. I'm sure Gurpreet is dying to get back out on the basketball court, or Martin on the soccer field. But we have to trust the advice of our health professionals, and so we talked about that today. that we're taking a slower approach in Peel Region. We also launched the Support Local campaign. Thank you to Claire Barnett and her team with economic development, trying to highlight ways to support local businesses. And Councillor Santos talked earlier today about the mental health services that we're providing as part of the social supports that are necessary in the community. Also want to give out a shout out to everyone that supported our Conquer COVID campaign. I would note that Ryan Reynolds not only tweeted about our campaign, everyone in council wearing the shirts, but did so again when we had our senior staff members wear the shirts. I love the different campaigns that are going on right now to support great causes in our community. It's actually tough to keep up with. I can't believe how many groups are making donations right now, to the fact that some days it's 4 or 5 requests we get to be there for a donation. It really shows we live in a community where generosity is contagious. The last thing that I'd mention, just more on a somber note, is in the last week we laid 55 charges. One of those charges was for a bylaw officer being assaulted. We had an incident where a bylaw officer was writing the tickets up in his car and someone tried to forcefully pull him out of their car. The police were called and this individual assaulted the police officer as well. So now the individual is facing criminal charges, but it's a reminder that the bylaw officers are on the front lines of keeping us safe and following the advice of public health to ensure physical distancing, but it's not always met with a smile, and sometimes there are people that are very selfish and reckless, and they have to be on the front lines of confronting that individual. And in one case, one of our Brampton employees was assaulted for simply doing his job, and I spoke to the individual, thanked him on behalf of the city of Brampton and city council, saying we're grateful for his dedication, and you know, there was no hesitation about continuing to work. He was proud to serve the city, and you know, for me, that's a sign of the caliber of the people we have working for the city of Brampton. But I want everyone to know that that's for me a reminder of the risk they take on for us, and whether it's Brampton Security, Brampton Bylaw, Peel Paramedics, Peel Police, the healthcare workers, Brampton Fire, they are all taking on risks. And for people that think that, you know, they're not just as busy, they are. You look at the fire we had a week ago and how busy Brampton Fire was. You look at the constant calls that our first responders have, and the Brampton Transit, 5 operators who tested positive. You know, these city of Brampton and Peel Region employees, they're heroes for us right now. And I given the fact one of them got abused, I just thought it was important to highlight that again. So that's my quick update.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. We have questions from members of committee. First up, I have Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if the mayor or anybody else there would have information on whether we are extending the time period that our armed forces are spending at Holland Christian Homes. I think we're in our 3rd week there. They were originally planned for 14 days, possibly to go to 30. So I'm just wondering if there's any update on that at all.
I can ask about that on our 5 o'clock call. My understanding was they were going to be there until they got out of the outbreak. I will get an update on what the plan is, and I can let you know, and all of council. Councillor Bowman, I would note we were one of 5 areas in the province that got that assistance. Only 5 senior homes in Ontario got the assistance of the Canadian Forces, so we're very grateful. And when they deem that we've been through it, then I assume they will be leaving, but they were not going to leave until the mission was accomplished, that they got us through a very difficult period. I was told that Holland Christian Homes was likened to a tinderbox because it's such an old facility, because there's so many residents in a close area. It was viewed as one of the more dangerous areas, and thanks to the Canadian Forces, they really have it under control right now. And so certainly makes you another reminder that we appreciate the dedication of the Canadian Forces.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Next up, Councillor Santos.
Hi, thank you through you, Chair. I just wanted, because I wasn't able to do it at the press conference earlier this morning, I wanted to shout out to the entire city staff for the city of Brampton for your incredible generosity towards our anchor organizations and supporting the broader community here in Brampton, in addition to all of the hard work that you continue to do. It is inspiring for all of council and the mayor to see every single department doing what they can to give back to the community during this time. So a heartfelt thank you to everybody.
Thank you. Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a question on relation to Councillor Medeiros' task force and some of the other task forces about the about the winding down, and maybe just a status update on where we are with that in relation to all the task forces and how that's being played out.
Thank you, Councillor. Perhaps Mayor Brown, you'd like to answer?
In terms of how long the task force will be going on for, really, I'd say the virus is gonna dictate that. As long as we're still in a pandemic and an emergency, I think the role of the task force are important. If we do flatten the curve and things are back to normal, then the services of the task force wouldn't be necessary. But as long as seniors are being told to stay in their homes, then I want us to provide the grocery and the medication pickup services. As long as businesses can't operate, I think the economic support's important. As long as youth aren't being allowed to go to school and there could be mental health issues, that youth task force needs to exist. And as long as homelessness and food security and the most vulnerable are at a greater risk because of this pandemic, then I really believe we need to continue the work of that task force. And so I don't think we should pick a date on our own. We should wait till public health tells us that we're essentially back to normal before we pick an end date for these.
So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I guess, and I agree with you 100%. I guess my question then relates more towards possible the CAO. If you can just advise on what's been happening on your end to look into the task forces. What work have you done? What have you asked of the task force leads as we go forward and kind of communicate to them that that the winding down is something that we're looking at, and then just on the date, and I believe there was a May 31st date of what we were kind of looking at. I don't know if Councilor Medeiros wants to chime in on that date as well.
Thank you, Councillor Paleshi. Councillor Medeiros, would you like to answer?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Paleshi, for the question. Again, just to reiterate, I think when I reached out to everyone, had the opportunity to just express gratitude and recognize the important work that everyone was doing. And again, just to reiterate what I said at the time was that, and you, I think your respective working groups are going to receive templates to that effect. What we identified, and I put out maybe if we said at the end of June or based at another time, looking at the fact that as we open, and for example, today is a good example, we have Committee of Council. And my opinion would be, and this is up for council discussion after, but just as a reminder, these task forces are not Committee of Council. These task forces are by the mayor who in his rightful due diligence and during the situation thought in his wisdom to convene these task forces. And these task forces have been doing a great job adhering to and providing some of the services that are required. So with that said, looking at some of the stuff as Committee of Council has reconvened, what some of recommendations, and again, these are just merely recommendations that can be accepted and not accepted, would be looking at opportunities where there's duplication of work or where there's no necessity to have a task force and a committee do the exact same work. And that's kind of the stuff, and that's why I've left it to respective task forces through their templates and through their opinions to come back with information on what they see that their task force should continue, or if some of the work that they do could be wind down and passed over to committee of council. And part of that rationale and what I would put forward is that when you, for example, have Economic Development and Recovery Task Force, but you also have Economic Development Committee, and a lot of the work is almost stepping on each other and crossover, it doesn't really make sense to have two layers. That's just my opinion, but again, when there's formal recommendations that go forward, and if you're asking me for a timetable, that could be at the end of the June, that could be at mid-July. Everything depends, again, where we are with the virus. And again, my understanding from the process is these recommendations I would be giving to the mayor for his consideration, and then really it's up to the mayor to provide it to staff if they want to come back after to council as a committee. But again, these are just things that we're looking at, and for now is if they're in need. But I, from some of my conversations with some of the task forces, I know that some task forces, from the services they provide, they're really not providing many services up to date. Again, it's not my call to decide if these task forces are worth continuing or not. I know, for example, the region is working with our city staff now to identify areas in which they can support and areas in which they wouldn't be able to take over, or agencies that could do so. And then really in terms of anything that comes regarding staff, because just as a reminder, as we continue and if we open up or if we go back to regular work, a lot of the staff who are in supporting these task forces have home positions to return to. So that's not something for, I think, that's something that for our CAO would have to look at the operational needs and put forth his recommendation, I guess, to the mayor on the continuance of some of these task forces or not. So just a quick answer, there aren't no dates right now. I'm aiming for maybe end of June to provide some draft recommendations that will be shared with all task force leads, and then you'll be able to provide input, and then hopefully I'll provide something to the mayor accordingly. But again, everything is shifting and based on what the province announces and the state of the pandemic. So I hope some of my answer helped, and I'm more than happy to speak with you offline further. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that, Councilor Medeiros, and you've been, if nothing, you've been consistent in your messaging, and again, I like I've said to you, I appreciate the work that you're doing. It's important work that that you're undertaking right now, and how does this and what does it look like? And my question just related to that timeline. I expressed to you my my views on the timeline, and I appreciate you again saying that it is floating, and we have to put something out there. We understand that. I guess from what I'm hearing back, on the ground level is the timeline that was put out there. Maybe some people don't know that it really is just a floating timeline, and so I know that you've been consistent with your messaging. I appreciate that. Just in relation to my other questions and what the CAO's office has put out to any of the team leads, the messaging around that, or any of the information. Can I get an update on that?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Thanks for the question. So there's a survey that's been put out to council staff, staff leads, the task force members, just to get some information back, documenting the services being provided through the task forces and what we're doing currently. We know we have a line of sight to reopening based on the announcements, and kudos to the councillors and the staff that are assisting through this. Currently, we have the ability to redeploy during an emergency, and we've done that. And many staff have really volunteered to be redeployed to support the good work of these task forces. But once the emergency is lifted, when I say that, I mean the official designation being lifted, we really have to be ready to transition those staff that are currently being redeployed back to their roles. And rather than figure it out as soon as that's happened, We're trying to figure it out now so that we can have a successful transition. So right now, to answer the question succinctly, Councillor Pleshy, is we're in the information gathering stage, trying to ensure that nothing falls through the cracks when we do that transition. And I know it's being done in consultation with the work of Councillor Medeiros' working group, the task forces which advise the mayor, and the staff reporting through committees that report and advise to council as a whole. So there are some conversations that still need to occur, and right now it's been generating feedback to make sure that, as I said, there's nothing falling through the cracks. There's a lot of good work being done. There's a lot of teams focusing on certain areas, and many councillors leading some of those specific areas that have staff supporting. So it's the communication piece to have us poised to be ready when this emergency is lifted.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Barrick, and I appreciate the comments. I guess one of my further comments would be to the effect that we ensure that the staff that is deployed to those task forces it's ensured to them or instilled in them that, you know, we respect all the work that they've been doing, and we don't want to put any more work on this for them to start thinking about, you know, going back to what they're doing, because we know that they're putting in a lot of time and a lot of effort into what they're doing. So I know that you know, the task force that Councilor Medeiros is leading, it's a great initiative. It's got great leadership at who's behind that and what they're doing, and I look forward to, you know, furthering that conversation. My view has always been of this pandemic that you know, nobody really acted fast enough, and that was, I think the city of Brampton has done a tremendous amount of work. But we look to our other levels of government where they didn't act. I felt that they didn't act fast enough. But in regards to that, I still don't think that we're an end. I don't think that there's an end in sight. I know that what you said about how we need to be ready for when that end comes, but I guess we also need to be ready for it not coming anytime soon. For another phase of this, phase 2, and for this potential tsunami to get even worse than what it is now. So I hope that work is being done. I'm sure that work is also being done and it being looked at, and that we're supporting staff in, you know, what they've done, where they've been redeployed, and not pushing them to start thinking about going back to where they came from. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Plushy. I have a request from Councillor Willens to provide a quick update on the garden program. Councillor, I've been seeing lots of pictures of residents sharing piles of earth on their front driveways, so we know it's getting out there. What would you like to add?
Yeah, just quickly, through some creative thinking, we were able to, actually, we've raised a bit of money to go back towards for cost recovery. To date, we've got over $35,000 worth of either cash donated or labor. Garden Gallery is actually equivalent to $5,500. They're doing a delivery for 100 homes for free. And Mattamy came through with us with $20,000 for the garden program. Paradise did 5, TAC did 2, and the Brampton Cricket Club, I just was talked to them yesterday, and they have raised $3,000 for us. So the community is pulling together to get us some cost recovery back on this program. So it's been great, and we've been getting a lot of good comments. So just that's all I wanted to update.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up, I have Councillor Medeiros. Do you still wish to speak?
Sorry, that must have been from before. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay. Very good. So thank you. I see no further questions or comments. I have a motion moved by Councillor Singh to receive this update, that the update from Mayor Brown regarding the COVID-19 emergency to the Committee of Council meeting of May 20th, 2020 be received. Are there any objections? Seeing none, we'll move on now to delegations. We have item 6.1. Public notice was issued by the city regarding a surplus declaration of city-owned block 158 on Plan 43M-1725 at Tree Grove Crescent and Wanless Drive in Ward 6. This relates to item 10.2.1 on today's agenda, a staff report regarding the surplus land declaration. In place of in-person delegations, written delegations are accepted regarding this matter. I will ask the clerk if there are any written delegations submitted regarding this public notice. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Chair, no written delegations have been submitted.
Seeing none, would we like to bring item 10.2.1 forward, and may I have somebody move receipt of that report?
I'll move it. Or
Through
Mike
you,
will
Mr.
move
Chair,
it,
Councillor Willens had been identified to move that those staff report recommendations in 10.2.1.
So we have a motion from Councillor Willens to receive item 10.2.1. Any opposed?
Just to clarify, Mr. Chair, it's to approve the staff recommendations, not to
To
receive the
approve
report.
the staff recommendations as outlined in item 10.2.1. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, that carries. Next, we have item 6.2, a delegation from Henry Verschuren, CD, Parade Commander, City of Brampton and Royal Canadian Legion Branch 15, regarding the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. Henry has been invited to participate in this virtual meeting for his delegation, and his presentation was distributed with our meeting agenda. Welcome, Henry. You have 5 minutes from the start of your presentation.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me all?
Perfectly, thank you.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say, as a Bramptonian, I am incredibly relieved, hopeful, and confident about the work that's being done by all the staff in the city, particularly City Council and the Mayor. It is good to see a very cohesive team at City Hall during this period. So thank you very much for that. On to my presentation. I want to talk to you today, planning forward and getting through this. I want to do something to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. It's an important anniversary. It affects Brampton. We have a number of World War II veterans still surviving in Brampton, and a couple of them are, well, two of them are, one will be 102 next month, and at the end of the year, the other one will be 101. But that's just two of many. Can I have the next slide, please? Can we go to the next slide, please? So Brampton has a record that I feel is far above what other communities do in terms of a memorial service that we do every year. We do a Bimini Parade this year. We did it virtually in April of every year. Declaration Day Parade is end of May, beginning of June. Again, we're doing that one virtually. Just a couple of us. Annual Remembrance Day dinner, the Candlelight Vigil in Gage Park. We do two different services on Remembrance Day. That's just a few of the things that we do every year. Next slide, please. Now, the dates for the end of World War II. Victory in Europe was declared on May 8, 1945. However, the war continued in the East, and the Second World War officially ended with the surrender of Japan on September the 2nd, 1945. And so I'm thinking about a date in September. Obviously, we couldn't do one earlier this year. Can I have the next slide, please? Can I have the next slide, please? So the historical significance for this in Brampton, as in World War I, many men and women from Brampton and the surrounding area. No, you're too far ahead of me. Go back one to the historical significance, please. There we go. Joined up and served. While many Bramptonians joined other services such as Navy and Air Force, most were Army, and they joined the Lawrence Scotch Regiment. They may have been transferred to other regiments during the course of the war, but when the war was over, they all came back to Brampton, were transferred back to the Lone Scots, and then released. Approximately 66 Bramptonians made the ultimate sacrifice in World War II. And I think that's worth commemorating. Now, historically, what we've done with anniversaries like this is, for example, in 2017, we marked the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Vimy Ridge with a huge parade and a service, and the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario was present for that. And so this one was planned around those lines, although I have to say to you now that when I put my original delegation request in, this function was a lot bigger than what I'm presenting to you today. I cut it back significantly because I understand the economic ties or crisis that's happening as well, and we don't even know if we're going to be able to do this because of COVID. But I think it's important to plan it now. Can we go to the next slide, please? Can I go to the next slide, please? So, it's proposed that on the afternoon of September 13th, 2020, that Brampton follows its usual exemplary tradition by commemorating this anniversary with a memorial service. Not a parade, just a service. We'll do it at the cenotaph. We'll put chairs out. Public will be invited. And the reason why there's no parade is I'm trying to save costs. We are literally dropping from an original budget of $22,000 to $2,000, and we'll review that later on. It's further proposed that we invite the Governor General of Canada to attend. So we'll review a guard of honor, and we'll go through the service in a moment. Now, whether or not the Governor General can attend is another matter. But again, we need to plan. Can I have the next slide, please? So, as I mentioned, this will take place on Memorial Square at the cenotaph. It'll be a basic Remembrance Day format. The arrival of the Governor General, inspection of an honor guard will be very small. A memorial service led by our chaplain will do the last post of 2-minute silence. I want the planes flying over as we have every year on Remembrance Day, weather permitting. There'll be a couple of wreaths laid, not 50 or more that we do on Remembrance Day. There'll be Governor General will lay a wreath, the mayor and council will lay a wreath. We'll probably have a couple of wreaths, 5 probably. Speaking by the mayor and the Governor General, and then we end. It's as simple as that. Half an hour, maybe 45 minutes tops. Can I have the next slide, please? So I've selected Sunday, June 13th as the date. And I'll tell you why. September 2nd, which is the official ending of the Second World War, falls on a Wednesday. The following weekend is Labor Day. I don't want to interfere with Labor Day events. I don't want to interfere with a long weekend event. Therefore, in order to avoid any conflicts, we've gone to the next weekend, Sunday, September the 13th. Now, coincidentally, as you all know, I'm wearing blue blazer today. That means leaves and stuff, right? You know the rules, Council. If I'm wearing a green jacket, then I'm there for the Lone Scots. And so the Lone Scots regimental birthday is on September 14th, so it ties in very nicely. Can I have the next slide, please? So going forward, time is of the essence on this. If we want the Governor General here in September, we have to get an invite out immediately. So and I'm asking today for approval in principle by committee and council, and once that happens, I'll send the invitation out. There'll be a caveat attached to that it has to be approved by full council, and it has to be, and there can be no COVID impairment from this. But the Governor General's office will be very clear about what they want her to do and not do. But we need to get that. Normally, you would need 6 months to send this invitation out. We've passed that. However, she's not doing other functions right now, so I don't think that. I think we can probably get by with 4 months' notice. If the committee approves in principle, then a staff report would normally follow, and I request that the staff report be submitted to the very next full council session, if possible, by the staff. I know the staff involved in this, and I'm confident they can do it because time is of the essence in this, and we need to move on it. Next slide, please. So after full council approval, the parade planning will commence in earnest with me as the parade commander for the city of Brampton, together with your special events team, who are exceptional. You've heard me say that time and time again. Parade participants will be contacted and invited, including all veterans, the Lawrence Scots Regiment, their regimental association, which is their group of veterans, the Great War Flying Museum to provide the planes flying overhead, soloists such as Samantha Piper, who we normally have for Remembrance Day. Brampton Concert Band will be involved, presidents of 11 other legions in the area, and elected officials from other levels of government. They'll all be on the invitation list, and plus a whole bunch of other people that I'm not going to list here because it's too long. So final slide. So here's what I'm looking for today. I'm looking for today a motion to approve this project in principle and subject to a staff report to be submitted at their earliest convenience to a full council session. Now I have attached to the materials that you were given, and I don't know if this is on, if you can put this on the screen or not, but there's a budget. Is that budget available, Mr. Clerk? Okay, well, I'm going to go through it anyway. As I said, when I initially started planning this, it was around the $22,000 mark. I pared it down. Now, I don't know. So we're looking at, we have to have St. John ambulance there. That's $250. The soloist for the Aboriginal flag ceremony and the singer cost a bit of money. The biggest expense is the 3 planes from the Great War Flying Museum for $1,500. So the total there is $2,050. Now, those are costs that I can identify. The thing that I can identify is city staff are going to be involved in this. City staff are going to be involved with audio, setting up the sound system, setting up the chairs, setting up the stage, etc. And I don't have costs for that. I'm not in a position to give you costs for that. But outside of any staffing costs, etc., from the city, there's the budget. Outside of the staffing costs of the city, it will cost a little over $2,000. You'll see there's a lot of blanks in there of people who, like Reverend Joe Murphy. Well, there's no cost for him, like our chaplain. Brampton Concert Band will be there with the full band, no cost. No cost for, we don't need the entire pipe band for the Lawrence Scots because we're not doing a parade. But I do need a solo piper, there'll be no cost there. The WWII reenactment group, this is the party that fires the 3 shots in Gates Park during the 2-minute silence, and there's no cost there either. So the cost that I can identify other than staffing costs for the city is $2,000. That's my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Parade Commander Henry Verschuren. We want to thank you for always bringing us opportunities to recognize the incredible sacrifices that were made by people around the world and from this country, and indeed here from Brampton. We have so many people here in Brampton who cherish their tradition of military service, and you coming to council on a regular basis to give us these opportunities to remember them and to commemorate these very special dates. It's no one's fault that we have a pandemic at this time when this opportunity to recognize the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II is happening at the same time. And if there is something that the city can do to remember this and to help our young people to remember the sacrifices made by people, I'm happy to move that staff look at how the city can provide for the remembrance of this very important date. I have a list of speakers. Councillor Charmaine Williams.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ventura, for coming in and delegating. It's almost like an excellent history lesson as well. And the 75th anniversary is significant. And it's a constant reminder of the sacrifice and the fight for freedom that we've, many have had to go through in order to make sure that we are the country we are today. So thank you so much for that. I hear that Councillor Vicente has moved receipt, and I was also going to move receipt and ask the staff to come back for with a report on how this can be done. I was just wanted to ask the staff, through you, Chair, how much time do you think they would need to come back with the report, knowing the time restrictions that Mr. Finchern has mentioned to us?
To staff, can anyone provide a comment as to these timelines for delivery of a report?
Thank you, Chair. We think we can turn it around within one cycle. So the
Okay,
next
great.
committee of council.
Okay, great. Well, I fully support a report coming back, and I look forward to hearing the details of it. Thank you.
And thank Councillor. So moved by you. Good point. We have next requesting to speak, Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Henry, for your presentation. Obviously, I think we want to have a very special presentation for the 75th anniversary and show those who have served, fallen, and continue to serve the incredible respect we have for our Canadian forces and veterans in our city. I know the City of Toronto is doing a virtual celebration. Maybe staff could, in this report, could look at what the City of Toronto and other communities are doing. My only thing I would just put out there is, as much as we're delaying this till September, there could be a second wave. A lot of the modeling suggests a second wave that could come in the fall or late fall, and wouldn't want anyone involved in this, especially if they're over the age of 65, for us to be putting them at risk. And so just let's make safety paramount in this and look at the best way we can honor this important date in history. But I'm sure we get all of that in the staff report. I would note that one of the stars for the city of Brampton is leaving. Teresa Mendler, who normally does a lot of the protocol stuff, got a job closer to home in Kitchener-Waterloo, and normally she'd be our wizard on this. So we're gonna have to fill her position pretty quickly, because she is one of the best in our city when it comes to that. But we should definitely do something and definitely show our respect.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Seeing no further speakers, I have a motion moved by Councillor Williams to receive the delegation, that the delegation from Henry Verschuren, CD, Parade Commander for the City of Brampton and Royal Canadian Legion, Branch 15, regarding the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II, to the Committee of Council meeting of May 20th, 2020 be received, and the request to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II with a commemoration event on Sunday, September 13th, 2020, be referred to staff for consideration and report back to the next meeting of council. Are there any opposed? Seeing no objections, Mr. Clerk, the motion carries. Members of the committee, we have no further delegations, so we move on to the Economic Development and Culture section. There are no staff presentations or reports or new business. We have no updates or correspondence, so we move quickly to Councillors' question period. Do any members have questions with regards to economic development and culture? Seeing none, we'll move on to public question period. Mr. Clerk, are there any questions? Excuse me, we do have a question from Councillor Pelletier. Councillor Pelletier, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's just awkward, unfortunately, on my iPad, so it's awkward to
No problem.
type. I guess this relates to ACTEV and a little bit of what the announcements we heard today with respect to the province asking that everybody start wearing masks. And I know that a lot of Bramptonians, being out a little bit, have been wearing masks. But how are we going to ensure that, one for our transit riders, that they're all wearing masks, and how are we going to, and what are we going to be enforcing at the city level? I think that maybe if the mayor can also speak on what his thoughts around the announcement for everybody to wearing masks were, I'd also like to hear from him as well.
Thank you, Councillor Pleshy. As chair of one of the chairs of the task force, we've had many conversations around this. It's important to remember that when we called this emergency, we had approximately a dozen members in all of Peel who were diagnosed with COVID-19. So that sets a very high bar for return to normalcy. But there are ways for us to return back to work, I think, and to do work here at the city if you take the reasonable precautions and wear PPE and follow certain protocols. But perhaps we can ask the CAO if he'd like to comment on with respect to the transit situation, and if the mayor also wishes to comment.
Great, thank you, Chair, for the question through to Councillor Pleshy. It's something that we talk about literally daily, not only as a senior leadership team, but as the BMO group, the Emergency Management Office, as well as our colleagues in the municipal area of Peel, so Mississauga, ourselves, Caledon, and the region. And so we will be strongly recommending, I think we're stopping short of required, although I've had regular conversations with our transit folks, so if Alex is on the line as well to maybe help clarify, he's been also in communication with other transit operators. So I'm not sure if we've fully landed on required versus strongly recommended, but it is something, especially after today's announcement, we're going to have to land on and land on pretty quickly. I would say that, you know, the spirit of the conversations always revolves around the safety of our bus operators first and foremost. So I want to maintain flag that that's the priority, as well as of course the riders. And so that's the kind of guiding principle. And so Alex, if you're on the call, I'm not sure if you're able to weigh in from the transit perspective.
Absolutely, and through the chair, all our operators are provided with masks and facial coverings. Are encouraged to wear. We have a very comprehensive program in place for sanitizing our vehicles, and as our operators relieve vehicles, they sanitize the driver's compartment area as well. It's interesting that that this came up about 5 minutes ago. The province just announced and released some guidelines specific to facial coverings and the use in transit as well. We're just disseminating through that information as we speak. Clearly, it's not a mandate. It is strongly recommended. And at this point, we are working with our entire COVID team and our CAO in regards to establishing our protocols moving forward and working with Stratcom on how we communicate that. So this is an ever-changing world for the facial coverings, and with the guidelines just announced by the province, which we're seeking clarity on with the minister at in a 2:30 call around some of that. But clearly there's more to come on that. But to answer more specifically that question, our operators are for most part using masks. It's not mandatory because some operators still feel that it causes more of a risk given the area that they're working in. But in short, they do have a barrier, which our system is very unique to others, where we do have a plexiglass between the passenger area and the driver's compartment. And sorry if that was too lengthy, I'll stop there. Thank you.
It's Patrick again. Good question, Councillor Pleshy, because the reality is, you know, I understand we're providing masks to our transit operators, but with five transit operators who have tested positive and the increased recognition by public health that we have to, you know, that we need to encourage, strongly recommend wearing masks more broadly. This is something that we're going to need to have a conversation on, whether we should mandate that for passengers on Brampton Transit. There's no reason we can't be a good example. And, you know, I'll take this question away with Alex and to Dr. Lawrence Lowe and talk about if Brampton wanted to be a good example, what are other countries doing, whether it's in Asia or in Europe, in terms of mandatory wearing masks on public transit. If that's a high risk, we should be looking at something more aggressive.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that, and that's exactly what when I heard the announcement today, was exactly what I was kind of thinking. So thank you for taking that on, and yeah, I think that it's really important. Not only we show leadership, but also that we just take the initiative and go full steam ahead to ensure that, you know, all these riders and everybody in Brampton is is safe with the best of our ability to do so. So thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pleshy. And just a question through to staff. I think this question coming here within the section for economic development and culture, with the recent reorganization, is there an appropriate time within our committee agenda where members can ask questions with respect to transit? Where would be the appropriate place? Should we create a section so that members can address transit-related questions?
So through you, Mr. Chair, so the current procedure bylaw currently allocates transit-related matters under the community services section, but with the recent reorganization, staff will take a look at the 4 committee sections and reallocate accordingly. It could go to Public Works, or it could stay in community services, or it could be a section on its own, but we'll work with the CEO's office on that.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So, Mr. Clerk, my question on, are there any questions submitted from members of the public with regards to this section of the agenda? Have we received any?
Through you, Mr. Chair, none for this section.
Okay, thank you. So that being the case, we will now move the chair over to Councillor Singh to chair the corporate services section of the committee agenda. Chair
All
Singh.
right. Thank you, Councillor Vicente. Moving on to the corporate services section. Moving on to reports 8.2.1. This report was considered as part of the consent motion. 8.2.2. A staff report regarding the purchasing activity quarterly report first quarter. Do any members have any questions or comments regarding the staff report? If so, please use the instant messaging section of Skype to add your name to the speakers list. I see Councillor Bowman, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. I have a few questions. I go through this list, and some things jump out at me that I just would like an explanation on. We have on the very first page, the first 2 items are hazardous material and designated substance abatement, 2 contracts worth $250,000. And I'm just wondering, how many of our facilities have asbestos that may have to be abated in them?
This is Jasbir through the chair. I will, because the facility operations and maintenance is under Public Works, so we do have the list. So currently I don't have the number, but I will definitely get the details and share with you.
Okay, and thanks, Jasbir, for that. And I guess you should just stay on the line because this next one as well. We've got the very next one is roughly $250,000 for the demolition of the theater block downtown. What is being done for contamination and abatement during the leveling or during the taking down of those buildings? Because they're very, very old buildings. I would not be surprised if those buildings had asbestos in them. So what sort of abatement program are we going to be putting in place since those buildings are right on our main street?
Through the chair, we take all the necessary precautions, but when they put the RFP out there in the project scope, the assessment, environmental assessment, and all the hazard material assessment is the part of the scope. So they, whosoever is bidding, so it's not that they will go and start demolishing the building. The whole precautions are taken, and the whole plan is the part of the RFP.
Okay, yeah, it just seems a little strange that we're planning on $250,000 for abatement in our own facilities, but yet we're going to be taking down an entire block that I'm sure is full of asbestos, and the cost there is roughly the same thing. So I just wondered about that. I want to make sure that for all those businesses that are around it and for the people that are downtown that we are going to be taking extreme caution when those buildings do come down. Next question, Public Works and Engineering. We had 3 contracts out all for vehicles, pickup trucks, all three for pickup trucks, and they all went to outside Peel vendors. They're all, I guess, Toronto vendors. Do we do anything to try and get local vendors, local automobile dealerships to bid on our tenders?
Through the chair, I have to find out. I don't think that there is currently we are trying to support the local vendors because that's a purchasing bylaw. So we follow that, whatever details are going through that. But I can find out the information. I'm pretty sure that there's no like a special treatment for the local vendors. We strictly follow the purchasing bylaw and those guidelines.
Okay, because I know, especially in the situation we're in now, local businesses are going to need to be supported. So I don't know if we're going to be able to change that at all. But I mean, you got about $1.1 to $1.2 million worth of new vehicles, but none of them are coming from our local dealerships. So hopefully we can change that in the future. Transit, Alex, you there? Thanks, Jasper.
Yes.
I'm just looking at, well, two of them actually. I know one is for the comfort of riders, and that's the air conditioning, supply of preventive maintenance for air conditioning. I just found it to be a little high, like it's what, $1.5 million for air conditioning on the buses.
Right. So through the chair, there's a couple of different ones on there, two different companies. And what we do is we split it out in terms of the labor side of maintaining the air conditioning system in the vehicles, and the other part is for parts on them. In terms of the amount, 450 or close to 430 to 35 vehicles, based on doing it in-house and based on contracting it out. These services are actually more cost efficient by contracting out through this contract and maintaining our air conditioning systems.
Okay, it just seemed pretty high. The other one I had, Alex, is for it's for delivery of 36 fare boxes for transit, and the tender amount is 631 grand. So that's 17,000 per box. I thought we were sort of trying to get away from fare collection and we were moving towards Presto. Is this something that we need to have on the buses?
Yeah, these are registering fare boxes that we have for still our special purpose tickets and for cash that count the cash intake. These are for vehicles that we're onboarding in 2020. We are looking at a longer term plan in terms of our strategic plan and phasing out cash altogether. And at that point in time, we will be visiting the use of fare boxes, because right now, currently, we have approximately 85 to 90% of our users on Presto. And in the interim, though, with our new vehicles, we still have to have some type of registering system that meets all the audit requirements for accepting cash and tickets, and that's the value of those fare boxes.
Wow. Okay. It seems very high to me, but if we need them, I mean, we're going to need them. But that's 17 grand per box seems pretty outrageous. But okay, thanks, Alex. For planning and development, there's one on here for consulting services to explore opportunities citywide for community improvement, and that's 100 grand. I thought we had working in-house already a group that was looking at community improvement, doing community plans, doing visits, doing walks. Why are we going to a consultant to check with the public on what they think could improve their communities? I thought we were already doing that.
Through the chair, it's Richard here.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, how are you, Councillor?
Good.
So basically, we are doing a citywide CIP community improvement plan update. Actually, not just an update, but a citywide CIP. So we do have resources that are applied towards that program. This is not the Nurturing Neighborhood program, Councillor, that you may be thinking about.
Yeah.
But it's more of related to looking at the affordable housing issue as well as economic recovery through the CIP program.
Okay, but and again, you know how I feel about consultants. Unfortunately,
Councillor, I do know your thoughts on consultants, and we are moving towards staff teams to move these projects forward. However, there are some circumstances where we do need to involve some specialized services to help with some of the technical review.
Okay. Thanks, Richard. Final two are for the CAO, for David. There's a promotional campaign at Pearson International Airport. So that was $100,000, and that was done for the first quarter. What was that campaign, and did it just run in the first quarter, or was that a yearly cost? What was that?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to pass that to Claire from Economic Development. I believe that was an initiative through that office.
Hi, yes, it was. That was an initiative that actually came to present to Council. Tracy from the Scented Lair downtown had a pop-up shop and a display at the airport, and was also promoting other downtown businesses. Unfortunately, that didn't proceed as planned because of COVID and the decline of traffic. So that has been paused, and we will pick up that initiative when travel continues and there's more activity at the airport.
Beautiful. Thanks, Claire. That was actually going to be my question, that did we spend all that money, and did we get the return for the investment, or did COVID interfere with that? It just says lead department under the office of the CAO. That's why I asked him. It should probably be under economic development. But thank you, Claire. The other one is promotional items, and again, they're under the office of the CAO, and I just wondered, that's a $200,000 contract for promotional souvenir items, and I just wondered what they are, because I guess for the last 3 or 4 months, whenever we look for badges or pins or anything like that, they're a very scarce commodity at City Hall.
Hi, Councillor. It's Jason from Strategic Communications. So we have, I believe, it's 3 vendors through an RFP that we use so that this is not done department by department, and so a comprehensive lens on those type of materials. So for instance, when the city hosts, one example I can provide would be the Garden Square for the Raptors games. We might hand out some t-shirts or some small souvenirs at a public event like that for promotional items, or flags at Canada Day for councillors and city staff to hand out, those type of things. And we do comprehensive view of that. And I believe, my understanding is the budget is funded and then drawn down on as different departments make use of that. So I don't have a full list with me today, but I could provide more information if you wish.
Okay, and would that include the little City of Brampton pins that, you know, all the councillors and basically everybody hands out to Girl Guide troops and stuff like that who ask for it?
Yes, I believe it would include those elements, and as always, if there's more of those that any councillor is looking for to share with the public, please let my office know, and we can facilitate more of those for anyone. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Councillor Bowman. Are there any more speakers on this item? Seeing none, I have a motion moved by Councillor Bowman to approve the report recommendations, which are that the report titled Purchasing Activity Quarterly Report First Quarter 2020 to the Committee of Council meeting of May 20, 2020 be received. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Otherwise, your vote will count in the affirmative. Hearing none, the motion carries. Moving on to 8.3.1, which was a request by Councillor Medeiros to discuss user fees.
Thank you, Chair Singh. So I guess as part of my role of working on the reopening and recovery, and some of the consultations I've had with sports user groups and with some feedback I've had from residents and so on, I've heard comments regarding user fees, and I know particularly in the sports area or our parks and recreational facilities, our sports groups have talked about an increase, and consistently there was a request if we can relook at that and look at ways that we can lessen the burden during this difficult period. So what I thought, instead of doing a one-off and asking staff to look at just at sports and recreation, I would just ask staff to come back with a report, and it doesn't have to be at next council, whenever staff feel that they have capacity to look at all our user fees that we provide as a city, understanding that some user fees already have gone up, or there have already been adjustments at the beginning of this year, but look at where we can provide some support by relief, or either by freezing any increases or by any other measures that staff could recommend. And also staff might recommend that at this juncture, because again, when we talk about some of these sports user groups, the province hasn't given them permission to use our facility, or haven't given them permission to reestablish their sport, so it could be a non-conversation understanding. But just because there was a lot of discussion around this, I just thought it would be prudent that if staff can take their time, look at all our sort of user fees from different departments, and come back with a consolidated report to council about where we can identify some relief and support in terms of reducing some user fees or freezing or whatever staff feels appropriate. I don't know if maybe our CAO would like to maybe comment to see if this is okay to do. And again, this is not something I'm looking for as of tomorrow, understanding that every day there's announcements from the province, but I just think it's prudent that, and I think I'll wait to hear other members of council, but I think we should look at ways that we can provide some relief and support to our community. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor. Through the chair, from a staff perspective, we're happy to comply and implement based on council's wishes. With respect to the timing, as this council is well aware, the budget was just approved February, and implementing some of these user fee changes in March, when we shortly thereafter shut our facilities down. So I'm not sure if the new rates actually have been kind of in effect or collected, so that the timing is pretty good. My sense is even maintaining the 2019 rates could certainly be appropriate, but we're happy to take it back and review the listing of user fees for consideration and recommendations for council.
Yeah, and thank you, CAO. That's exactly what I was thinking, is that I would allow staff to propose where they think appropriate, or just if some of this haven't been applicable, because in my discussions with Councillor Fortini and others, and they did raise the fact that some of these sports or some of these user fees haven't been applied just because we haven't had the opportunity because of COVID, that they've been a freeze. So I appreciate that. And in terms of timelines, I'm comfortable with what staff feel appropriate to come back. So I'm not sure, Peter, if you think it's appropriate to put a timeline just to ensure that we're on track. I know we see here May 27th, but I'm also lenient enough that if staff want to come back on the 27th and say that they need more time, I'm fine with that as well. And if council feels appropriate as well.
If I may, thank you through the chair.
Yeah.
So for May 27th, council would in effect, the report would have to be distributed by this Friday. So we'll endeavor to do our best, and that may be a walk-on report if it's for the 27th. If not, the meeting right after. But we'll try to get it to you sooner rather than later.
No, I'm fine with the meeting after. Again, there's no pressure unless staff feel. I'll leave that in your hands and allow staff to discuss, and if there's areas in which we think we need an immediate response, then appropriate. And I'm fine with waiting till the following meeting after, as long as it's in the pipeline and we're working on it, so at least we can communicate to our residents, our user groups, and so on, that we're looking at everything that we're doing, and we'll come back accordingly.
All right. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I will take a vote for anyone opposed to this motion. Otherwise, your vote will count in the affirmative. Okay, seeing none, the motion passes. Moving on to Councillor question period. Our next item is 8.5. Councillor question period for this section of the agenda. Do any members have any questions regarding the corporate services section? If so, please use the instant messaging section of Skype to add your name to the speakers list. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to public question period. This is normally where we invite members of the public to come forward to the podium and ask any questions about any recommendation made by committee during this section of the agenda. Given our virtual meeting today, questions are sent to the city clerk's office during the course of today's meeting to relay to the committee. There's a 5-minute limit for all questions and answers for this section. I will ask the clerk if there are any questions submitted during the course of today's meeting.
Mr. Chair, there have been no questions submitted for this section.
Perfect. I will now pass on the chair to Councillor Vicente to chair the corporate services section of the committee agenda.
Thank you. Members of committee, we're now moving on to Public Works and Engineering. We had 2 reports which were in the consent agenda, item 9.2.1 and 9.2.2. So that brings us to our next item, 9.2.3, a staff report regarding automated speed enforcement, or ASE.
Just a moment, Mr. Chair. Your sound just cut out.
You can hear me now?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Am I good to proceed to questions from members?
Yes, I believe we're just one moment. We're just going to check to make sure the stream is okay. Yes, it's okay. So we're okay to continue, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
I'm happy just to repeat that we're now on item 9.2.3, a staff report regarding automated speed enforcement, or ASE. Do any members have any questions? I see a question from Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much through you, Mr. Chair. Just with the report on the ASE, I had requested a little while ago as to whether we were going to have the speed enforcement cameras on Main Street. At that point, we didn't, strictly because it wasn't considered a community safety zone at that point, and we were going to look at rezoning to a community safety zone. Has that been looked at yet?
Through the chair, it's Kevin Miniker. Councillor Bowman, we have the Main Street on our list to convert to a community safety zone, which we'll be doing at a committee of council meeting in June.
Thanks very much, Kevin. And a follow-up question for you. By the way, you guys are doing great work during the COVID crisis, so thank you for that. On Steeles Avenue, even listening to some of the police reports, we have an increased issue of people speeding. They've recognized it. I live very close, backing onto Steeles Avenue, and I hear it every day, whether it's cars or motorcycles. Are we going to be able to do anything on major streets like Steeles to get this slowed down?
Through the chair to Councillor Bowman, there is an opportunity to convert some of the arterial roads to community safety zones if that is the wish of council, but we caution the use on some of the arterial roads. It's not necessarily what the automated speed enforcement is meant for. But that being said, Steeles Avenue is a regional road, so we can definitely pass that request along to our counterparts of the region.
Okay, and I'm sure, Kevin, that when the police talk about the increased amount of speeding that they're seeing, it's not just like on Steeles. It could be on Williams, it could be on Beauvert, Queen. It could be any of those. And so I'm just wondering, before we get people killed because of somebody going 60 kilometers, 70 kilometers over the speed limit, it's something we should perhaps look at. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mayor Brown.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of these automatic speed devices, and I continue to get complaints about speeding, street racing in our community. This weekend there was a flurry of activity in the Mount Pleasant area that some of you might have seen social media comments about. And as much as the police tried to get to all the problems, they only have so many resources, and we want their resources targeted towards the more dangerous situations. I guess my question about this report is, how can we do this faster? We talked about making sure we have one of these devices in every school zone in the city, and based on the number of schools for in the city, how long is it going to take us to get these set up in every school zone in the city?
Through the chair to Mayor Brown, we're looking to start with 5 units to get an idea of what exactly it's going to take to spread the cameras around every school zone in the city. We want to get an idea of what resources are going to be required, not only through traffic services, but also through the courthouse, who are going to be receiving a lot of challenges to some of the tickets. So we really wanted to take this first time period where we're going to be implementing them to sort of assess what's going to be required.
Yeah, and I just say, I feel like we're dipping our toe in too slowly to this. We get complaints about taxes, we get complaints about potholes, but probably the most common complaint we get is about speeding. And I get so many complaints about a young child who almost got hit or did get hit in a school zone. I'm sure councillors can attest that they get these complaints too. This is a great tool that they've given municipalities. The province has given municipalities. I remember that I said this before. I was in the provincial legislature when Premier Wynne put this forward, and I got up and spoke in favor of it, saying that it's a no-brainer. It helps out police resources, and I was glad they gave this tool to municipalities. Well, I really don't think we should be going this slowly. I would love for us to have a plan and a timetable of how we're going to get this to all the school zones, and at the very least, because right now, I guess my first question is, how many schools do we have in the city? Do we have that number? How many community safety zones and school zones do we have in the city of Brampton?
Through the chair to Mayor Brown, I'm just estimating a couple hundred. Currently, we only have 10 community safety zones in the city.
So a couple, say 200 schools and 10 community safety zones, would that be your estimate?
Through the chair, yes.
So we're looking at 2% right now. There was a lot of goodwill and a lot of excitement that we finally had a tool that would help rein in speeding. I still remember Councillor Paleshi's words when we first talked about this a year and a half ago, when he said, if you're concerned about your privacy being infringed, don't speed in a school zone. And if you complain about that, don't speed in a school zone. It's pretty straightforward. And so we can justify this. It's going to make our communities safer. And maybe, Peter, you could help me with a motion on this, that I'd like to amend this report, that we get a timetable back to council before the summer recess on how a timetable for how we can achieve getting all the school zones covered And so if that's a 2-year timetable, okay, it's good to know. If it's going to take us 2 years to put 200 of these in, I want to be able to tell the public how long it's going to take to do this. If you come back to us and say the best we can do is half the schools in the city, well, then I want to know that. And so if we could maybe have a supplementary report before July on what the city's timetable is to achieve this across the city, because I struggle being able to say that kids who go to one school have a greater value than kids, their safety has a greater value than kids that go to another school. I'd love to be able to give this sense of safety to children in every school. And, we all think about our own families. If one day Theodore is going to be running around, if he's running across the street, not listening to his parents, I'd hate to think that he would be at risk. And we have to do everything we can to combat this. And we finally have a tool. And a big fat ticket is a deterrence. Saying that those signs that say slow down, there's kids in the area, those aren't necessarily the same deterrence that a big fat ticket is. And so people understand where there's these photo radar devices. And so I would like us to be much more aggressive. And if the courts can't handle it, well, they'll have to adapt. And frankly, this would be a good pressure point on them. If it means more justice of the peace need to be appointed, I'll take that message to the province and say that people who are street racing in front of schools are getting off because you haven't appointed enough JPs. I will tell the Minister of Justice that. I will tell the Premier that. Let's just create the system, and we'll find how to get the judiciary. We'll make sure that the judicial aspect of this can adapt. So, Peter, if you could work on that, wordsmithing that amendment, and I think Councillor Pleshy has a question too.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Councillor Pleshy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mayor Brown. And I think that, maybe it's just as easy as relabeling all school zones, community safety zones within the city of Brampton. And I think that, we're not able to put, there's a process in trying to get these cameras, these speed enforcement cameras up in areas. And the process is that it needs to be designated a community safety zone. Well, what's more important to the city of Brampton in terms of safety zones than the areas that are around the schools that our children are attending the schools and then in the morning and in the afternoon, and then beautiful days like today that they would like to go to the school and use some of their facilities. Unfortunately, that can't happen here today. But like the mayor stated, and we've said it in the past, like how can you put anything on the safety of our children? And with respect to the speeders, like I don't want to get complaints about speeding in school zones. Like it's almost like they're all near misses, and I don't like that. I would rather deal with somebody that was complaining to me that they had they got a ticket while speeding in a school zone, because like the mayor said, I have something to say to that person. If you don't want the ticket, then don't speed in the school zone. So maybe the motion needs to be written in a way that all school zones become community safety zones. And then we start working through a process on how we try and get these enforcement devices in our school zones and in all of our school zones. And then as we create more zones in the city of Brampton, as we grow, and I'd also like to just get a quick some information on the school zones and the signs that we have posted to date. How that's going, and when will the actual devices be installed in? I think there was 4 or 5 of them across the city as of right now.
This is JSB. Through the chair, I just want to say that we fully understand the sense of urgency, the logic, and the concern, and we will make sure that within the stipulated time, we bring back the whole plan with the budgetary implications and detail, because this is a very complex, like we need to have a Ministry of Transportation, and there is a giant processing center which is manned by City of Toronto. So we will thoroughly explore, and we will definitely put a huge sense of urgency into this, and we will come back to the council before by the end of July with a full plan, like a whole safety plan. And as per the devices are concerned, we are planning to put, I think, the 90 days. The time line has almost finished, so it's the time to put the devices. We are putting them at the 5 places. So Kevin can he knows the exact locations. Kevin, if you know, I'm pretty sure that we have the 5 devices going into the school zone.
Through the chair, yes, the 5 locations are Richvale Drive, Fern Forest, Avondale Boulevard, Vaughan Street, and Ray Lawson Boulevard.
Okay, so and thank you for that. I guess I know that the work needs to be done through the Toronto switchboard, but then also with respect to the stop arm cameras that we're currently working at the City of Brampton, the Region of Peel, we're thinking about creating our own within the region, and this is something that could handle that as well. So, but even though that work is happening at the city level, we're going to reach out to Toronto. The region's working on it through the stop arm cameras on the school buses. I still want the process to be put forward, or the report back on how we go through the process to change our school zones, all school zones, into the community safety zones. And we don't necessarily stop there either. We look at other areas of Brampton. You got Ching Park, where Councillor Fortini, Councillor Charmaine, or Councillor Williams could remind me. I don't believe that there's any schools that wrap around that circle, but still a big area for children to be crossing the road, and maybe a potential area in the future to have a community safety zone as well. So I think that the mayor's right. I agree with what we should be looking at and turning this into, and the work that needs to get done while we're reaching out and talking to the other levels as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pleshy. So members of committee, we now have a motion that's been moved by Councillor Dillon and amended by both the mayor and Councillor Pleshy. So you have the amendments there on the screen. So speaking to the motion as amended, I have Councillor Williams.
Hi, thank you. Through the chair, I think it is an excellent idea to have the school zones turned into community safety zones, because I know that once you have those areas established, it's easier to move the cameras around, and it's just a barrier, because every time that we want to have a camera move to a certain area, we have to go through this process of putting in the request to have these areas designated as community safety zones. Can I just get clarification from the staff? What is needed to have the community safety, the school zones designated as community safety zones? Is that something required outside of us at the city moving a motion to have this done?
Through the chair to Councillor Williams, it's basically as simple as passing a bylaw through council.
Okay, wonderful. So I think that having this, moving this motion, will that essentially accomplish what we're trying to do? And is that going to change the bylaw to have our all school zones designated as community safety zones? Hello? Is that what this motion is going to do? This motion is to have the bylaw changed.
So if staff could comment on how it would work to designate all of the school zones as community safety zones.
Through the chair, I'd like to have maybe a meeting after this with our legal department to try to see what needs to be done to possibly adjust the bylaw text rather than having a completely new schedule with every single school zone in it. It would get quite complicated to do it that way.
Okay. Well, I would be in full support, and maybe if it is needed, maybe a friendly amendment to the movers to say that to adjust the bylaw to have school zones designated as community safety zones in order to make sure we're accomplishing what it is we want to accomplish. Because I think it's great, especially in Ward 7 and 8, and in Ward 7 in particular, there are many schools in the area that are impacted by speeders, and it has a trickle effect. We have so many students and parents who won't let their kids walk to school, and you know, we want to get back to that, because if we have more kids walking to school and feeling safe to walk to school, we'll have less congestion in the morning around these schools, and that's what we want to accomplish. We want to make sure that our mornings aren't completely overwhelmed with cars parking on the sides of the roads to drop their kids off to school. If we can get more kids to walk and feeling safe, this will definitely help increase the confidence that many parents will need to have in order to send their kids off to school on foot rather than in a vehicle. So I fully support this change, and I just want to make sure if we need to have the amendment to change the bylaw in there, if that's required, then I would like to see that, the wording there, to have a change to the bylaw to allow for school zones to be designated as community safety zones. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. And to Councillor Dillon, who's moving the motion, Councillor, do you accept these amendments as friendly amendments to your motion with respect to Mayor Brown requesting that all school zones be also designated as community safety zones, and that this work be expedited? Councillor Dillon? Because I know procedurally the clerk is looking for clarification. Mr. Clerk, is Councillor Dillon on?
Through you, Mr. Chair, he is a participant, but I just don't see him in at the moment. It looks like he's paused his Skype session. So perhaps we could continue and come back, and then at the time of voting, it could be voted on as an amendment if there's no clarity that it's accepted as a friendly amendment.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to put my name on as the mover of the motion until Councillor Dillon comes back.
Thank you, Councillor. And so I think that we are crafting this motion in real time, and I see these as friendly amendments. So I will go to my next speaker, which I believe is Councillor Singh.
Yeah, I got my questions answered through Councillor Williams' questioning, so thank you.
Very good. Councillor, then I have Councillor Fortini.
Thank you through the chair, and thank you to everyone and the mayor for bringing this forward. And I remember when we started these cameras, I did ask the question to staff, why should we have these in all schools? And my question was answered by, it takes time, and then we have to go through that company that's installing these cameras. But one of my concerns I've always seen around Chinguacousy Park, especially Ward 7, that these roads are a little bit wider than new subdivision. But when we have cars parked on both sides of the street, it becomes a problem. Now, I know the smaller roads, if we have to get a fire truck through or anything, and kids going to school, going around these cars, it becomes very hard. I know Mississauga, Pat Sado's, the area, they kind of put a pilot project going through that no parking, only on one side of the street you're allowed to park, and now I think they're doing all Mississauga. So maybe, putting these cameras on and having people parked on both sides and the safety for around the school zones, it becomes very hard when people have to drive around these small streets and watch out for kids. So maybe, I don't know if parking only on one side will help also too. Just my thoughts.
Thank you. Next I have Councillor Bowman.
Hi, through you, Mr. Chair. Just to a friendly amendment as well. When we were first discussing this, I also asked about the potential to have some of the parks that children play in that face directly onto main streets. For example, Councillor Medeiros and I have Bonnie Braes Park that faces onto Credit View and Bonnie Braes Drive. And if some of those parks or parkettes could also be included with the schools, I mean, that's where you've got a lot of the kids playing. Specifically, that's where the parents take them to play. So they are dangerous areas, and if it's accepted as a friendly amendment, I'd like to see if there's any parks, like Bonnie Braes, that could be added to that list, again, with a criteria that they face openly onto a busy street. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Councillor Dillon, are you back? Are you accepting these as friendly amendments?
Yes, I'm back. Thank you. I do accept them.
Okay, thank you. So moving to my next speaker, I believe Councillor Fertini for the second time.
Yeah, so thank you. I just wanted to add it as an amendment to see about the parking on both sides, if it's okay. If you could, please.
Councillor Fertini, can you just expand on your request?
Just look at parking only on one side of the street, and I have parking on both sides around all these school zones and all, because I see them in the morning here on Goldcrest, in the past, like when I drive by these schools, they're parked all over the place. So if we have at least parking only on one side, it would help also the cameras, and these kids, they just run across the street and it's very hard to see if we're looking at the safety. And, a lot of the parents are dropping off all the kids at school and picking them up, and it becomes very congested. And when you're parked all over the place, it's very, very hard. And it's not only about the safety of the kids. If there's ever a fire, a lot of these fire trucks are not going to be able to get by. So maybe we could look at, add a friendly amendment to look at that if we can.
Thank you, Councillor Fertini. Looking to staff virtually, of course, because we're not all in the same room, would staff like to comment and assist with respect to how parking on one side of the street may be a part of this?
I will. This is Jasbir. Through you, Chair. I think that we need a long-term strategy on this. We need to do some data analysis too. It's not. We need to do some benchmarking also on this, because if we are just going to implement one side of parking, it definitely affects how the traffic and how the behavior there. There's a huge component about the education of the public in that area too, because people are used to parking on the both sides. So we also need to have a community engagement strategy. So my recommendation is this, that we keep these two separate. We can do the benchmarking parallelly on the single street parking on the one side, but for this speed enforcement, that's my recommendation, that we keep it separate.
Through the chair, it's Richard.
Proceed.
So members of council, council may recall that we have included resources to do a comprehensive parking strategy this year, and that we'll be undertaking a comprehensive parking strategy, which this component of it can be part of that. So I would agree with Jasbir that we keep the community safety zone and speeding component of it separate from the analysis of parking, restricting parking to one side versus another, and we can look at that through the comprehensive parking strategy.
So through from the chair to planning and development, are you saying that this amendment for the review of parking on one side of the street in these zones we investigate, that's already being taken care of in your other work?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay, so Councillor Fertini, are you okay with that and leaving the motion as has been amended by Councillors Paleshi and Mayor Brown and Councillor Bowman?
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Removing that? Okay, very good.
Yeah, we can look at maybe every street. I'll talk to Richard the commissioner offline. Thank you so much.
Very good. So members of committee, you have the motion before you as amended. I know that this is a very passionate, this is a point of discussion that brings out a lot of passion from members of council. In fact, we do get a lot of calls with regards to speeding. This is an important issue, and we're trying to do what we can from the city's point of view to make the community safer. So I'm going to ask for a recorded vote from the clerk. I see no other speakers on the board. Mr. Clerk.
Recorded vote's been requested on the motion as amended. Councillor Santos.
Yes.
Councillor Chair Vicente.
Yes.
Councillor Willens.
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi.
Yes.
Councillor Bowman.
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros.
Yes.
Councillor Williams.
Yes.
Councillor Fortini.
Yes.
Councillor Singh.
Yes.
Councillor Dillon.
Yes.
Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That motion carries unanimously, 11-0.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Thank you, members of committee. Now we move on to item 9.2.4, a staff report regarding a request for budget amended, developer reimbursements for the development of 4 natural heritage system recreational trails and 4 neighborhood parks in Wards 6, 8, and 9. Do any members have any questions or comments regarding the staff report? I'm seeing no questions, so thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Fortini to approve the report recommendations. If there are no objections, the motion will carry. Seeing no objections, that's carried. Next, we have Councillor's question period. Do any members of committee have any questions with regards to any item in this section? Seeing none. Mr. Clerk, are there any questions from members of the public with regards to any item in this section of today's agenda?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is a question. It's not directly related to matters that the committee has considered, but I'll read the question. It's from Sabina Coulter, owner of Fanzarelli's Restaurant and Wine Bar. What is the city planning to do to assist downtown Brampton businesses with parking? Please, can the city look into more parking? With more businesses slowly opening, we are all struggling to find parking.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I believe this is something that has come up in discussions before. Would a member of staff be able to offer some insights on how we can begin to provide for some parking? Indeed, in the downtown, parking is allowed on all the streets despite the signage, but we've been getting some calls and correspondence from downtown businesses that these are currently becoming maxed out.
Through the chair, Jasper here. So currently, you rightly said that parking is allowed on the city streets, and there is no parking infraction enforcement. So we have closed the parking lots based on the emergency announcement by the mayor, and also based on the emergency announcement which was made by the provincial government too. So we can definitely open the parking for the public use if the direction is given by the council to do so. We can open the City Hall, West Tower, as well as the Nelson parking garage and the George Street parking garage, and even the open parking next to the opposite LCBO. So based on the direction, we can open the parking.
So for clarification, Commissioner Reina, with respect to provincial guidelines, parking is now permitted if council were to provide that direction?
If my understanding is there, the parking is it's still closed. I haven't seen, but I can check back and let you know. I don't think the parking is allowed.
Okay, perhaps so that council can make a proper decision. We are in committee here, and we just did receive this question, but this has been a discussion point for some time. Would members of council support a motion to have staff provide a more fulsome report for us to consider, perhaps even gradually, reopening parking in the Four Corners area for downtown businesses to use? So I'll move that motion.
So through you, Mr. Chair, So we are at public question period. So if committee
Yes.
wishes to consider this as an item, they'll have to reopen the agenda by a 2/3 vote, add new business, and then have a proper motion placed.
Very good. So would there be support from committee to reopen the agenda to consider this item based on the question which just came in from a member of the public?
So Chair, it's David Barrick here. I'm wondering if I can offer comment before council maybe decides to go that route. We're also in a receipt from a staff perspective, from a letter from the BIA who has requested to reopen the George Street open air lot as well as possibly the Nelson Street parking garage as well. And so these requests are starting to come forward. The logistics of allowing staff the authority to go ahead and do that is related to the emergency bylaw. And so council has a couple of pathways, and it's one, committee today can perhaps request or ask the mayor to amend the bylaw to allow that. The mayor has the authority currently to make that adjustment. And I know when we originally, I believe we did the closures, they were done on an emergency basis and then the bylaw brought forward. The other option is we simply wait until council meeting next week, and council can do that. So staff is currently not in a position to open it without the bylaw amendment. The bylaw can be amended by the mayor, or the bylaw can be amended by council.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shea. So that could be something that is brought forward at next week's meeting of council, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions, Mr. Clerk, from members of the public?
No, there are not, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. So that ends this section of the agenda. I will now pass the chair over to Councillor Santos to chair the corporate services section of the committee agenda. Chair Santos.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vicente. We are now in section 10, community services section. The next item is 10.2.1, a staff report regarding a surplus declaration of city-owned block 158 on plan 43M 1725 at Tree Grove Crescent and Wanless Drive. Do any public notice was issued for this item and no comments were submitted? Do any members have any questions or comments regarding the staff report? Please use the messenger to let me know.
Madam Chair, that item was dealt with when we called for delegations at the beginning of the meeting, as opposed to in its agenda order. So that matter has been resolved. Okay, so that matter has been resolved. I now have the next item, which is councillor question period. That was the only item. Do any members of council have any questions regarding this section? Seeing none, public question period 10.6. Mr. Clerk, do we have any questions from the public via email? Madam Chair, there is a question that's come in from Sylvia Menezes Roberts. It's regarding transit. It's a two-part question. Now that the province has begun the process of reopening, how is Brampton Transit planning to avoid crowding if demand is even 50% of normal volumes? And the second question is, the Transit Committee has met once in February, was supposed to meet for the second time in May, which was canceled. The next meeting's in the fall. Transit has massively changed since early February. Are there plans to start doing advisory meetings electronically? And perhaps, Madam Chair, I'll start by answering the second question, and then perhaps Alex can answer the first question. At this point, there's been a conscious effort not to reconvene the citizen-based advisory committees out of necessity, because the urgent matters of the business of the corporation that need to be conducted can be conducted through the emergency powers that exist with the mayor and or the powers of council acting. So at this point, and given the public health orders to refrain from gathering, the training that would be involved with well over 100 citizens and their participation levels in electronic meetings, it's been deemed at this point that electronic or virtual meetings of citizen advisory committees are not to proceed at this time. That could change as we see the prognosis for the pandemic easing up and we ease into a new normal.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. And General Manager Milojevic, do you have any comments based on the first question?
Absolutely, through you, Chair. we are developing a plan, a recovery plan that we will be bringing to committee of council in regards to how we recover in starting to collect fares, front door boardings, and still keeping some physical distancing within our vehicle to the limitations that we can. Given the increase of volumes that we expect, it will be hard to maintain movement of the people that we expect, given the physical distancing measures that we have in place. Hence, we're looking at the provincial guidelines that were just released on how that may assist in that, and also, as was discussed earlier, strongly recommending our customers use facial coverings. And as the mayor mentioned, whether we mandate that or not will still yet to be determined, and we'll be bringing back a report to council, making some recommendations and endorsement by council.
Thank you, General Manager Milojevic. The next item of the agenda is item 11, referred matters list. Do any members have any questions regarding the referred matters list, which is published quarterly on a meeting agenda? There are no questions. The next section is public question period. Our final public question period for the day. There is a 15-minute limit. Mr. Clerk, do we have any questions submitted during the course of today's meeting?
Madam Chair, there are no more questions.
Wonderful. So now we are at item 13, closed session. I have a motion moved by Councillor Paleshi to move into closed session to deal with the following item, 13.1, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Otherwise, your vote will count in the affirmative. I see no opposition. This meeting is now recessed in order for council to consider its closed business in committee room 4A, and also move into closed session through the call number assigned to you by the city clerk. To all members of the public watching, at the start and end of public session, we will come back closed session. When closed session is completed, council will reconvene in public session to complete its business on today's agenda. Mr. Clerk, how much time would you need?
Madam Chair, 10 minutes would be appreciated.
Okay, if everyone can please dial in or make your way to the boardroom. In 10 minutes, we will reconvene at 3:12 sharp. Thank you. In the continuing interest of transparency and open government, I will report on in public session any outcomes from today's closed session business. As a result of our closed session today, I wish to report the following. 13.1, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. This item was considered in closed session and direction was given. The clerk will now put that up on the screen for us.
Madam Chair, that motion is going to come up momentarily.
Okay. That was one of the fastest closed sessions we've ever had.
Madam Chair, while it's coming up, I'll read the motion. This is in regard to item 13.1. The matter was considered and direction was given to consider the following motion in open session. 1, that a bylaw be passed to approve and ratify an agreement of purchase and sale accepted February 24th, 2020 between the City of Brampton and Habitat for Humanity, Greater Toronto Area, for the sale of the city's lands municipally known as 1524 Countryside Drive in Brampton, legally described as part of Lot 16, Concession 4 EHS, Chinguacousy, described as parts of 5 and 6, subject to an easement over Part 6 on Expropriation Plan PR 1675121, being part of PIN 14225-0107 LT. And the second motion is that the Commissioner of Community Services be authorized to execute any agreements and other documents necessary for the completion of the city's sale to Habitat for Humanity Greater Toronto Area of 1524 Countryside Drive in Brampton on terms acceptable to the Senior Manager, Realty Services, and in a form acceptable to the City Solicitor or Designate.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. That is the motion. We are still waiting for it to be on the screen, but you have read it out loud. Do any members oppose this motion? Otherwise, your vote will be counted in the affirmative. Okay, I see no opposition to the motion. That motion carries. We are now at item number 14, which is adjournment. Our committee is next scheduled to meet on Wednesday, June the 3rd at 1 p.m. I have a motion moved by Councillor Singh to adjourn today's special meeting. That committee do now adjourn to meet again for a regular meeting of committee on Wednesday, May 20th, 2020 at 1 p.m. or at the call of the mayor. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Otherwise, your vote will count in the affirmative. I see no opposition. Thank you. The meeting is now adjourned. Stay safe, stay healthy. Most importantly, stay home and practice physical distancing to help flatten the curve of this COVID-19 emergency. Be well.